Dear ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, dear guests, good afternoon. It's 16:00. Let me start the Dissertation Committee session. Declare open. We will discuss today the dissertation of Ekaterina Andreevna Karzaeva, seeking an academic degree of economic sciences in the degree field 080010, finance and currency circulation and credit, on the topic the assessment of solvency based on cash flows in the company's financial diagnostics system. And by the Act of St. Petersburg University, dated the 10th of July 2020, I, Viktor Vladimirovich Ivanov, Doctor of Economic Sciences, Professor, Head of the Department of Theory of Credit and Financial Management, St. Petersburg's University, was appointed Chairman of the Dissertation Committee session and session committee, and also other members of the station committee are Natalia Stepanovna Voronova, Doctor of Economic Sciences, Professor of the Department of Theory of Credit and Financial Management, St. Petersburg University, Vladimir Anatolyevich Chernenko, Doctor of Economic Sciences, Professor of the Department of Corporate Finance and Assessment of Business, St. Petersburg State Economic University, Tatiana Pavlovna Satsuk, Doctor of Economic Sciences, Professor, Head of the Department of Accounting and Audit, St. Petersburg State University of Rail Communications of the Emperor Alexander I. Online with us today is Dmitry Alexeyevich Pankov, Doctor of Economic Sciences, Professor, Head of the Department of Accounting, Analysis and Audit in different industries of the economy, Belarusian State Economic University, Belarus. Can you hear and see us? Yes. Also, we have the candidate with us, of course, Ekaterina Andreevna Karzaeva. Here she is. Also, at this meeting, the academic advisor of the candidate, Nadezhda Alexeyevna Lvova, Doctor of Economic Sciences, Professor of the Department of Theory of Credit and Financial Management, St. Petersburg State University, is present with us. So, I would like everyone to switch off their communication devices, including mobile phones. And also, we have. I would like to mention that a live broadcast is provided on the website of St. Petersburg University, accompanied by simultaneous interpretation between Russian and English. And also, you can send your emails to the email that is also published on the website. These questions will be relayed to me by technical services, but I would like to remind you that all the questions should be related to the presentation and to the candidate and the dissertation content. And please sign your questions and cite your affiliation. All the questions that do not relate to the content of the dissertation or the presentation will not be read. According to the procedure of awarding academic degrees of Candidate of Sciences and Doctor of Sciences in St. Petersburg University, a session of the dissertation committee is deemed legitimate if not less than 2/3 of the established membership of the dissertation committee, but not fewer than 4 people are present. Our dissertation committee consists of 5 people. All 5 people are present, including one in an online contact with us. We can see the member of the station council who is online in online contact with us and can hear him. But the station committee session will not exceed 2 hours. The agenda is as follows: a short presentation of the chairman on the submitted paperwork by the candidate about the station and studies. 5 minutes. Short presentation of the academic of the candidate. 15 minutes. Answers of the candidate. Questions to the candidate on the presentation. 2 minutes per question. Answers of the candidate not more than 5 minutes for all questions. Then reviews of all the members of the station council that would provide assessment of the station and the presentation, about 10 minutes per speaker. Then the chairman of the station council will read his review, and the answers of the followed by the answers of the station. Not more than 20 minutes to address all the comments and issues, and then an open discussion floor, but only if you register can you speak, and the comments should not exceed 2 minutes, and then the chairman will read out any questions that have been submitted via email. Then answers of the candidate, not more than 2 minutes per question, and then there will be a presentation of the academic advisor of the candidate, not more than 3 minutes. Then a discussion by the members of the station committee before an open voting procedure takes place, and then we can have this deliberation period for 5 minutes, and the broadcast will be switched off, and it will be followed by an open voting procedure, counting of the votes, and entering the results into the minutes, and then the decision of awarding or not awarding the sought academic degree will be taken, and then a concluding statement by the candidate, or not more than 2 minutes. So if you have any objections to this agenda, then we will continue and cover the items one by one. The first one to speak is me, the station of Karzaeva, Ekaterina, Andreevna, seeking the candidate of economic sciences degree in the field of finance, currency, circulation and credit, on the topic the assessment of solvency based on cash flows in the company's financial diagnostics. This was accepted for defense by the Act of the academic secretary of St. Petersburg University on the 9th of July 2020. Ekaterina Andreevna Karzaeva wrote her dissertation in St. Petersburg University. She was advised by the Doctor of Economic Sciences, Professor of the Department of Theory of Credit and Financial Management, St. Petersburg University, Nadezhda Alexeyevna Lvova. The number of publications that cover the content of the dissertation is 5 in the referred journals established by the Ministry of Education and Science of the Russian Federation, 4 publications, and in the Web of Science and Scopus journals, 1 publication. All the documents that are necessary for the defense to take place have been submitted. They comply with the regulations. So before I give the floor to the candidate, I would like to ask the members of the Station Council if there are any objections, and I would like to ask if I need to list all the documents that have been submitted. No, then the candidate, Ekaterina Andreevna, the floor is yours. Dear members of the Station Committee, dear attendees, the dissertation research, the assessment of solvency based on cash flows and the company's financial diagnostic system is presented to your attention. The assessment of solvency underlies the characteristics of the financial condition of an economic entity, and the level of accuracy of this assessment affects the quality of all financial diagnostics. In this regard, the goal of the dissertation research was set to identify promising directions for the development of the methodology for assessing solvency based on cash flows and the financial diagnostic systems of a company. In accordance with the goal, a new methodological approach to assessing solvency has been developed, which makes it possible to assess the sufficiency of funds to pay off the forthcoming obligations in a certain future period, taking into account the financial individual characteristics of business activity. The proposed methodological approach is based on the following theoretical results of this station. The criteria of long-term solvency in the system of ideas about the financial diagnosis of a company have been clarified. The limitations of using traditional approaches to assessing the company's solvency have been identified. In turn, the introduced methodological approach has also received applied development. On its basis, methods have been developed for assessing the solvency of internal and external users of financial statements, taking into account the information support of financial diagnosis. The fourth slide shows the possibility of using the author's methodology for assessing solvency in the analysis of investment projects. Developed a methodology for maintaining the long-term solvency of an enterprise by reserving funds in a bank deposit. The scope of applications of the author's approach to assessing solvency is supplemented by the task of identifying ineffective managerial decisions of past periods and unrealistic forecasts of cash flow. Let us reveal the results. The study showed that the criteria for long-term solvency in the financial diagnosis systems are the temporal comparability of cash flow outflows and inflows, the ability to repay current liabilities with available cash, the elimination of short-term insolvency ensured by maintaining a positive net cash flow and planning sources for liquidating cash gaps. To achieve long-term solvency predictive analysis of a particular value, allowing users to financial information to compare future receipts and payment. This slide identifies limitations in the application of traditional approaches to assessing solvency and to emphasize the feasibility of analyzing projected cash flows. The incomparability of assessment of assets and liabilities, often a different period of their turnover, the duration of the transformation of assets into cash, orientation of historical data make it possible to currently assess the solvency, and the insufficient attention to the regular assessment of coverage of costs and the implementation of an investment project can lead to an unpredictable need for additional finances. Seventh slide shows the methodological approach proposed in the dissertation that assumes the calculation of the forecast net cash flow, which is used as the basis of assessing solvency, can give results. Net cash flow is estimated by temporarily shifting revenue for the grace period, which allows you to determine when a specific amount of revenue is converted into cash. It is assumed that the operating payment scheme is similar in structure to the revenue circulation scheme. The company carries out the purchase and pays for it after a period of time stipulated by the contractual relation with the supplier. After calculating the amounts of all significant receipts and payments in the study period, it's necessary to compare the amounts received with each other. If the receipts of funds for all types of activities exceed the amount of payments, then we can talk about the solvency of the enterprise. In the opposite situation, we can conclude about the short-term insolvency. When talking about external uses of financial statements, it's necessary to take into account the limited access to the relevant information of the studied enterprise. And therefore, the metrics used for internal users need to be adapted. Accordingly, to assess the solvency, it is proposed to use the information of the balance sheet and the statement of financial result of the enterprise, which are then converted into information of cash flows. The resulting positive net cash flow in the balance can be considered as a source of investment, creation of internal reserves, or expansion of turnover for current activities. The negative cash flow, net cash flow, in turn, reflects the need for funding. In particular, within the framework of the analysis of investment projects, we can talk about additional investment needs. It is advisable to estimate this volume into a scenario approach, taking into account the realistic, optimistic, and baseline scenarios. In order to maintain a long-term solvency in the work, a scheme for reserving funds on a deposit was proposed, which is detailed for different types of business. It is shown that by reserving upcoming large payments with their subsequent use at the due date of payment, it is possible to avoid delays in payment and the occurrence of unplanned accounts payable. The author's approach to the assessment of solvency dispenses the possibilities of financial diagnosis of management decisions related to the payment of receivables in the past periods of economic activity. So with the increase of short-term liabilities and the presence of a significant cash flow balances, cash balances in the period that follows the reporting period, there may be an intentional non-repayment of debt. The author's approach of assessing solvency can be applied to internal and external financial diagnosis, in particular to promote decision-making on the distribution of financial resources, business development, to form the basis for assessing creditworthiness and predicting financial solvency. In addition, the result of the research can be on demand for the education process. Thank you very much for your attention. Can we ask questions? Could you have a look at slide number 9, please? Is this number 9? Yes, before that. So the statistics revenue. When we talk about the external assessment, we cannot use the information that is not public. Therefore, the information on the revenue, cash revenue, we should look at the previous periods and then try to. So this is jargon, okay. So yeah, so the term is used in this field. Something else that irritates me, or something has been clarified or made more precise. Well, what do you mean? When I analyzed the literature, I identified different criteria of solvency, and I systematized them and adapted to the tasks that lay before me out of all the information base of the criteria of solvency, I singled out those that are applicable to my research. Okay, clear. Thank you. Colleagues, do you have any other questions? No. May I have a question? Yes, can I ask a question? Thank you very much. Very interesting presentation. You look at the solvency. Do you have any calculations on the assessment or the rhythmicity of cash flow? Or do you use discrete values to identify the solvency criterion? Is based on the prognosis of cash flows of a particular company. If we talk about internal indicators, we look at the internal database to see what we can forecast as cash flows for the enterprise. So the analysis is then based on the different forecasts. So the liability is there? Well, do you think that it should be restrained by company? Well, this question was not part of my research. We understand that that solvency, liabilities are always there, and then so the credits are there, but when we look at we don't concern ourselves with how to regulate what the company should regulate their liabilities, their loans, etc. But we just look at the how these liabilities relate to the solvency of the company. Thank you. Do you have any other questions? Vladimir Anatolovich, please. Ekaterina, Andreevna, you talk about the mechanism of depositing or reserving funds. Will it not lead to the difficulties in the circulation of monies? Good question. Yes. You're right. When you put out the money into a turnover, then of course it can contribute to the solvency, but I think that we should balance it with some reserving, some funds, and because short-term solvency should be always taken into account. So you have to store some money in order to offset future insolvency. Then the factors that negatively affecting the positive result. Exogenic factors that affect the formation of the positive cash flow. What are these? The factors that can have an impact on the cash flow may include, for example, for the analysis of and the research, for example, the factor of the lack of forecastability. For example, and then, for example, credit loans that have been have passed the due time, and therefore there will be no return of these, and of course this will affect negatively on the forecast of the solvency of the company. So in our methodology, we take account of this factor. Thank you very much. I have a question. Colleagues, do you have any questions? Natalia Stepanovna, Ekaterina, Andreevna, please tell us. In some traditional method approaches, there are some restraints that have to do with attracting investment. For example, for some investment goals, how can you use the coefficient solvency in order to address this issue? When we talk about not about the identification of insolvency, but trying to find solutions of restoring the coefficient of financial dependency can be a factor. For example, how accessible external investment can be or financing can be. The use of the coefficient of financial dependency can expand the approach to the assessment of solvency. You can use this coefficient to you can monitor the financial lever. Yes, thank you very much. Ekaterina Andreevna, please, could you open slide 6, please? I have some clarifying questions. Next one, 6th slide. Yes, 7th. No, it's not 6th. So you talk about the different financial activities. When we talk about the methodological approach of assessment for internal users, these coefficients take into account the balance and both for internal and external users. To improve the efficiency of assessment, internal users can use balance sheets, etc. But for external users, they don't have access to the internal documentation. So you add up investment, operational activities, and therefore I had a question of the analysis for the cash flow circulation scheme. Yes, we have different indicators for the operational activities, financial and managerial activities. The components of this model you said if the operational activity involves a deferral of payments, then we can identify as short-term insolvency. Short-term insolvency is the fact of impossibility of paying on the date, paying off on the date due of the and so the short term is basically that because they don't pay on the date due. So this is a very interesting term, short-term insolvency. So we study a period of when the debts were not paid off, and then calculate a coefficient, and then we come out with the conclusion that the company is in short-term insolvency. What criteria do you use to calculate overdue payments, liabilities? My methods are based on that all the dates are derived from contracts. So the overdue payments can be identified as overdue liabilities. So this is used for internal users. For external users, there's not enough information for assessment. So, and by answering when I answered the previous questions, internal users can use any data that is that is stored within the company. So, and the external users don't have access to that information. And colleagues, do you have any other questions? If no more questions, Ekaterina and Andreevna, please take a seat. And we continue our work. And then now we turn to the reviews of the academic our reviews are uploaded on the website, and therefore we can only highlight the key issues. First of all, I would like to say that the research is very relevant. Expands the instruments of financial diagnostics, and based on the cash flows, what says a lot about the relevance. The approach can help forecast insolvency and to predict cash flow gaps. I think that the proposed approach includes not only the tools of identifying the factors of insolvency, but provides instruments of maintaining solvency and talks about the amount of internal reserves and helps decision making of the company and the outside users, and therefore this contributes to both theoretical development of the field and also practical applicability. As far as the validity of the statements defended and the recommendation that are formulated, the theoretical base is very well studied and systematized. The conclusions on the methodological review, all the conclusions are justified. The correct references also contribute to the validity of the statements. But of course, I think we should talk about the originality of the research. As we focus on some issues that we see a new approach to identify solvency criteria, and where we can see that cash flow is comparable to the inflow of money, and then this allows us to identify cash flow gaps in the company. And again, this leads us to some decision-making solutions, and of course, very important for the economy. The author has developed some significant results, and of course, original and independent. The theoretical base, systematization of the approaches, identify the criteria of long-term solvency, and therefore delineates the scope of the research, systematization of some limitations are also developed, and so the methodological approach then identifies some recommendations of how to overcome the insolvency dangers, and external users and internal users are described as different because of the access of information that they have, and therefore short-term insolvency is also identified. And the author says that when we know what short-term insolvency is like in a company, it can help us to calculate the long-term insolvency. And also the author identifies the amounts of cash needed to attract in order to close the cash flow gaps, and also the methods help to identify how much cash should be deposited in a bank deposit in order to secure the solvency of the company. The theoretical and practical significance of the research are there. We can say that the main statements are published, have been published in some journal articles, and therefore the research, this research work complies with the regulations of St. Petersburg University that relate to the awarding of academic degrees. But I also would like to say that that the author has presented key research ideas at different conferences and in enough instances. But of course, there are some critical remarks that I would like to ask. What I think this author's statement about the frequency and the interval boundaries of financial diagnosis for obtaining information about possible short-term insolvency should be considered a bit controversial. If it is recommended to take a calendar month as the optimal forecast interval, then the question arises, how will cash gaps, which may arise in the enterprise on a daily basis, affect the solvency? Also, using the assumption of equal distribution of proceeds within the reporting period in the proposed model of projected cash inflows, it is necessary to additionally explain how to use, and it is possible, if it's possible at all, this methodology for other types of business described in the dissertation with a different dynamics of cash inflows. Another thing, the work repeatedly mentions the distribution of free and net cash flow. In particular, section 3.2 notes that NPW should be allocated to create reserves to cover future projected cash gaps. But section 2.3 proposes to direct NPW to investment. In this regard, in your opinion, would you think that some priorities should be established in this regard? And the last thing is, the author rightly points out that with the negative net cash flow, it may be necessary to attract external financing, but the approach itself does not take into account the possibility of such attraction of financing. It is necessary to comment on whether the inclusion of the financial dependence ratio in the calculations could show not only the need for additional finance, but also the possibility of attracting this finance. As far as the overall conclusion, all these critical remarks don't cancel the positive impressions of the work and do not diminish the practical importance. The research has been conducted independently by the author, and it contributes to the field by presenting new methodological approaches to calculating solvency of an enterprise. And therefore, the dissertation of Ekaterina Andreevna, Karzaeva, completely complies with the regulations of St. Petersburg University on awarding academic degrees. And therefore, the candidate deserves being awarded an academic degree of candidate of economic sciences. The plagiarism requirement has not been violated. So, Ekaterina Andreevna, please, your opportunity to answer. Natalia Stepanova, please accept my thanks. Well, first of all, the remark about the possible cash gaps within the period under study is absolutely correct. Cash gaps can indeed occur on a daily basis. A delay in payments to suppliers even for several days is a violation of contractual relations, which negatively affects solvency. Nevertheless, it is highly probable that such a delay will be settled without the risk of penalties and loss of business relations with the counterparty. Which is more problematic is if the fact of non-payment is in an interval beyond the recommended forecast period. Speaking about the possibility of using the proposed approach to types of business with different dynamics of cash flow, it is worth emphasizing that the main criterion for applying the proposed methods is the predictability of receipts and payments at the enterprise under study. It is important to consider that the timing of receipts and payment is determined by the contractual relationship. Therefore, no matter how regular the receipts and payments are, using the tools proposed in the work, you can calculate and compare their volumes in an analyzed period. Regarding the allocation of free net cash flow, it is important to determine that covering projected cash gaps is a priority in order to maintain long-term solvency. According to investment, or an increase in turnover for current activities should take place after ensuring the solvency of the enterprise. Thank you very much for your valuable advice on introducing the leverage ratio. And this can broaden the understanding of subject's financial condition and improve the quality of diagnosis. However, the task of identifying the need for additional financing and the possibility of attracting this financing goes beyond the assessment of solvency. Thus, this will be an addition to the author's methodology for assessing solvency, but not its development. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Please take your seat. Professor Chernenko, please. I would like to thank Ekaterina Andreevna Karzaeva for taking up such a difficult topic. I would like to say that that solvency assessment is not only the possibility of calculating cash flows, but it helps companies in technical and strategic decision making. As the comparison of different methods of assessing net cash inflows and outflows, as the assessment of the function of an enterprise in a concrete environment. There's the assessment of a company within the industry and within a region. This is a very comprehensive research, and I looked. I saw that the methods that was used had been used by the when analyzed the company that she worked for, and also in addition 15 studied 15 more enterprises. Well, this goes a long way to the practical importance of this research. Well, this is a comprehensive study. Thank you very much for taking up this work. Well, I will not read the whole review, but I will just say that the results that have been obtained. The dissertation research makes a contribution to the field. The following results. The characteristics of long-term solvency have been identified, and the possibility of covering the overdue payments, and new methods were developed that are based on the prognosis of cash flows, and again, the new methodology is quite valid. That is based on the necessity to compare the available data of cash flows. A new analytical apparatus was developed for internal and external users, and then which allows us not only use the internally available information, but also externally publicly available information. And then the bank deposit reservation of funds as a precautionary measure was described in detail to deter insolvency. And the practical applicability for internal users of the information allows to forecast the risks and manage these risks. As far as the internal users, they have a new set of tools to conduct audit of their counter agents, and I would, as Natalia Stepanovna said already, this is good work. Of course, some critical remarks, some drawbacks are there. The dissertation dissertation does not cover the topic of other financial procedures applicable in the framework of the financial diagnostics, which must be carried out in conjunction with the proposed methodological approach to assessing solvency to provide a complete picture of the financial condition of the research object. The question arises about the validity of the proposal to create a reserve of funds instead of investing them or attracting them into circulation. The decision to include in the size of the required investment in the analysis of investment projects the sums of potential cash gaps that may arise in the 5th and 10th year of the project's life is ambiguous, taking into account the weak reliability of such forecasting due to the remoteness of the period and time. Pages 676 and 77. On the whole, though, the results were achieved by the dissertation author attest to the conclusion that the author of the dissertation deserves the right to be awarded the candidate of sciences in economics because the dissertation complies with the regulations of St. Petersburg University on awarding such degrees, and therefore the plagiarism clause number 11 has not been violated by the author. So therefore I endorse the positive resolution. Thank you very much. Ekaterina Andreevna, please, your comments. Thank you very much, Vladimir Anatolyevich, for the invaluable comments. I agree with that the exclusion of other analytical procedures of financial diagnosis in the dissertation could complement the practical results of the dissertation, which will be taken into account by me in further research. However, the emphasis on solvency was made for the possibility of its deeper analysis, search and identification of problems in this area. It is also difficult to argue as well with the fact that money could bring a greater return when attracted into circulation than bank interest. But in accordance with the task defined in the work of maintaining solvency and preventing cash gaps, conservation as a justified measures. Speaking about the calculation of investment needs, I must agree that the current attraction of funds for the elimination of cash gaps that may arise at a late stage of its implementation is irrational, is unjustified. Nevertheless, I believe that determining such a need within the framework of the analysis of being carried out, with possible subsequent adjustment when approaching this stage, is no less important than forecasting the cash flows themselves. The search as such for the sources of eliminating cash gaps is advisable in shorter forecast intervals. Moreover, this possibility is shown using the author's approach, which is a new contribution to presented research. Thank you. So, the Professor Setsuk Tatiana Pavlovna, your microphone, please. There haven't been many works that have been devoted to commercial enterprise activities and handling credits, handling of credits. Well, there haven't been many, very few, in fact. Therefore, when you took up this topic of improving communication or interaction with external and internal users, this is a very relevant topic, very current, and the methods that have been developed in the research on improving the financial diagnostics are quite valid and practically applicable. Well, the work is quite logically structured, especially the conceptual base. The results that were achieved are valid and justified by different methodologies, both internal and external, and also the supplements attest to the verifiability of the results. The results show the expansion of analytical possibilities by adding additional information to the financial condition of the enterprise. The theoretical relevance is obvious. There's a combination of analytical procedures. They expand the comparability of financial information and the forecast of solvency. So the financial diagnostics is the focus for the implementation of the proposed approaches. The criterion of temporal shift of receipts and new approaches of developing internal financial information database that would talk about the solvency of the company. The author shows how the instruments can be used in investment analysis, very relevant issue today in many companies, especially those that expand their business. This investment need of investment is a very important factor for them. The author demonstrates how these methods that she developed can be used in decision making, in developing the business or expand it. But the practicability of the research is really outstanding, and the mechanisms and the methods proposed by the author take into account some individual characteristics of business activities and forecasting as part of investment analysis. This can contribute to the development of financial investment analysis, and therefore the result is, in the sum up of what I just said, that these recommendations are very valid for any company. Well, of course, there are some drawbacks. I have only in my only 3 my review. The boundaries that of solvency are too conservative, and the designated framework for recognizing solvency is overly conservative. As I said, to issue solvency, the condition for the excess of the amount of funds over the amount of debt required to be paid on the date of payment must be met throughout the entire life cycle of the enterprise. It turns out that a one-time fact of short-term insolvency is the basis for recognizing the enterprise as a whole insolvent in the long term without the right to restore solvency. Further, in the conclusion, the following is said about the excess of receipts over payments. If this trend persists for a long time, it is possible to make a conclusion that about the long-term solvency of an economic entity. It becomes unclear that long-term solvency should be maintained throughout the entire life cycle, or a certain long period of time. Well, it's kind of unclear. And the third comment, the presence of overdue debts with sufficient balances of money in the accounts of the enterprise does not always indicate that the organization deliberately allows delays in part of the payments. It is worth taking into account possible changes in the terms of contractual relations when counterparties, with the provision of a longer grace period, as well as the accumulation of funds by an economic entity for subsequent large transactions with a higher priority. Well, therefore, but all of these critical remarks by no means diminish the value of the work and of this practice-oriented research. So all the statements that were validated meet the field passport of the specialism of economics, subfield of economics, and publications in the journals, the prestigious journals attest to the value of the research. Therefore, the dissertation meets the requirements of St. Petersburg University procedures on awarding academic degrees of candidate of candidate of sciences, and Karzaeva Ekaterina Andreevna deserves the right to be awarded the sought academic degree. Thank you. Tatiana Pavlovna, thank you very much. Ekaterina Andreevna, you're right to address the critical remarks. Thank you very much, Tatiana Pavlovna, for your comments. Well, I cannot but agree with your comment about the conservatism of science, of insolvency, which follow from the criteria of long-term solvency introduced in the dissertation. However, the one-time factor of insolvency should be interpreted from our point of view so that the company cannot be called absolutely solvent in the long run. However, this does not exclude the possibility of restoration of solvency in the subsequent periods. We do not focus on the differences in absolute and relative solvency, since when conducting financial diagnosis, the dynamics of an increase or decrease in solvency can be of greater analytical value than the defect of the presence of short-term solvency of an enterprise during its life cycle. I also thank Tatiana Pavlovna for the question about clarifying the relationship between a long period and the life cycle of enterprise from the standpoint of interpreting long-term solvency. And of course, in the noted phrase, we're talking about an assumption that should have been formulated more clearly. Examples of similar assumptions can be found in investment analysis, but they're traditionally used as they traditionally use the concepts of going concern. That is, the post-forecast period is taken as infinite. Financial diagnoses are based on a life cycle assumption. Thus, a long period can be conditionally equated with the life cycle of a company. The remark about the ambiguity of the interpretation of intentional non-payment with sufficient balances of money in the accounts is partly true, since other factors of delay are not excluded. Accordingly, in the strict sense, we introduce the assumption of a deliberate violation of payment discipline. Nevertheless, if the fact of overdue debt or its growth is repeatedly revealed, for the external analyst, this should become a reason for additional verification of the counterparty's conscientious or bona fide behavior. Thank you. Thank you very much. Dear colleagues, Professor Pankov, Dmitry Alexeyevich, thank you very much. Can you hear me? First of all, I would like to thank for the honor and the great responsibility to work as part of this committee. This very good, interesting appearance of online participation. I think that from my experience, this is a very interesting work, and the focus on cash flows is the most difficult issue in forecasting economic solvency. Well, we can talk the possibility of forecasting the financial solvency of counter-agents that pay for the products of the company. We see a synthesis here. There are some categories, for example, cash flows, investment, and prognosis and diagnosis. Well, these are fundamental areas that can be studied alone, but to combine them brings very interesting results. And at this station, the relevance and the originality is obvious. The work is very harmonious, and it combines the theory and practice-oriented aspects. I will not repeat my colleagues. I read this work very attentively. I endorse this work. I confirmed that the work has practical significance and furthers research. Some critical remarks, because this work is the interface of different disciplines. I have 3 critical remarks. When I read the dissertation, then in some parts of the work I found some contradictions. For example, on page 39, as one of the shortcomings of the current methods of assessing solvency, the author cites the use of an information base that includes only data from previous periods, while for assessing solvency it is advisable to use forecast values. At the same time, when developing an indicator of solvency for external analysts, the author suggests using statistical models and available retrospective data. Page 105. It turns out that the limitation that internal analysts can bypass using the proposed methodological approach for external analysts to some extent remains relevant. Well, maybe you should combine the 2 approaches in a more less contradictory way. The second one, when characterizing the coefficients of the predicted solvency, the maximum analysis period is not indicated. To what extent is it permissible without losing the reliability of the results obtained to use the proposed indicators for periods far from the reporting period? Some short-term strategy or medium-term such indicators should be used. But also, the third comment is the paper indicates that the cash flow from operating activities should form the basis for assessing solvency. But in the methodology proposed by the author, cash flows are not separated by types of activities when assessing results. Receipts from operating, investment, and financial activities are compared with payments for the same types of activities in aggregate. Accordingly, the question arises why the emphasis on operating activities is made in calculations but not in the assessing of results. Well, but I think the research raises a whole dimension of thematic of avenues of research in the field. This is, I think, maybe this solvency could be calculated or classified as unconditional insolvency or unconditional, but nevertheless, my critical remarks do not diminish the conceptual significance of the work, and the dissertation completely meets the requirements of St. Petersburg University including the regulations on awarding academic degrees of Candidate of Science and Doctor of Science at St. Petersburg University. I'd like to add from myself that the results of what I read and are relevant to our enterprises, Belarusian companies. Thank you very much, and wish you success in your future research. Thank you very much. The floor is yours, Ekaterina Andreevna. Thank you very much, Dmitry Alexeyevich, for this extremely important remarks. Commenting on the retrospective nature of the information base for external users, I can say that the use of such sources is more a limitation than a disadvantage. Indeed, the assessment of solvency according to the methodology for internal users is more indicative in terms of the accuracy and reliability of the forecast. However, for external users, the information about the enterprise that can be obtained from open sources was used, which here relates with the traditional approach to the information support of external financial diagnostics. Answering the first question of Dmitry Alexeyevich, it should be admitted that the closer the analyzed period is to the reporting period, the more accurate the result will be. In the analysis of distant periods, the accuracy of any forecast decreases. Indeed, any useful financial information must be reliable. However, as defined as the conceptual frameworks of IFRS, credibility does not mean accurate in all respects. The defining criteria for reliability or veracity are sufficient completeness and neutrality of the presentation. Thus, the admissibility of using remote forecasts is certainly limited by the requirements of the reliability of the results obtained, but they're not excluded. On the second question, I note that the proposed approach for assessing solvency is based on the cash flow statement model, which is primarily adapted to systematize the indicators used. The key importance of the operating flow is the methodology is due to the fact that receipts and payments from operating activities in most cases prevail in terms of their size and regularity, determining the economic activity of the enterprise. This, in turn, does not negate the separate inclusion in the calculation of investment and financial flows. As for the direct assessment of solvency, the very fact of the excess of receipt over payments and in aggregate from all types of activity is of fundamental importance. Thank you. I'm totally happy with the answers. Dear colleagues, this is my turn to voice my. Most publications are based on the information of previous periods on the current cash flow analysis. So this is a very good approach on determining the risks, but the concrete periods are not included. But the author proposes different diagnostic tools, including the solvency issues. This therefore attests to the relevance of the research, the validity of the results and the recommendations is obvious. The basis is the profound study of the literature, of norms and regulations, and that relate to the solvency of enterprises. The scientific originality lies in the development of methodology of long-term insolvency or solvency based on cash flow analysis. But the author introduces the coefficient of shifts on the prognosis of operational inflows, operational activities, cash inflows. The justification of the model of assessment of prognosis of solvency for external users is very important, and the theoretical significance of the work is that it expands the instruments of the use of instruments of internal and external audits of solvency. The comparison of the diagnostics used by the internal and external analyst. The comparison is the advantage of this work. And the author tackles the financial sustainability of the company. The dissertation, of course, has some drawbacks, and I would like to mention, according to the author, there's no difference between the liquidity. Judging by the text, the author does not distinguish between the concepts of liquidity, liquidity of assets, liquidity of the balance sheet, liquidity of the economic entities. The author interprets all these concepts through the prism of the enterprise's ability to quickly sell its assets to receive cash. This approach can hardly be considered correct. The author's assertion that the more time it takes to convert an asset into cash, the less liquid the asset is considered to be, and accordingly less solvent of the enterprise, is also controversial. First, it must be borne in mind that the timing of the conversion of an asset into cash largely depends on the selling price of a particular asset. If we ignore the factor asset sale price, then formally all assets can be considered as absolutely liquid. Secondly, with such an interpretation of solvency, the formally less solvent will be those enterprises in which non-current assets predominate in the structure of assets. However, this conclusion is not confirmed by real-life practice. It is hardly possible to agree with the author's assertion that in the long run, all profits will take the form of cash. As you know, many enterprises have had accounts receivable which are never transformed into cash, but are taken into account as part of the indicator sales proceeds, and accordingly in the calculation of profit indicators. Further, the author says satisfaction of payment claims of counterparties in accordance with the terms of contracts considers exclusively through the payment of funds. In real practice, satisfaction of payment claims can be carried out both through offset and through barter schemes and through other forms of satisfaction of payment claims. And the last one, there are also some categorical statements in the work. So on page 24, the author writes that the regulations of external factors affecting the solvency of the organization can be carried out only at the state level. In real practice, a number of environmental factors, external factors affecting the solvency of the organization, are regulated at the international level as well. Anyway, the critical remarks do not diminish the positive impression of the work. It's written by in a very good language with a very erudite approach, and the relevant issue is studied in a very coherent way and yields very practice-oriented and theoretically oriented results. So therefore, all the regulations, the regulations of the St. Petersburg University state that the statements should relate to the degree field that in which the degree is sought, and I can confirm that these statements do conform with the field passport, academic field passport, and therefore Karzaeva Ekaterina Andreevna deserves the right to be awarded an academic degree of a candidate of economic sciences in finance, currency, circulation, and credit. Thank you very much, Ekaterina Andreevna. Your turn to answer. I would like to thank Victor Vladimirovich for the comments and the review. Commenting on the use of the term liquidity with an emphasis on the ability of assets to be transformed into cash, I would like to clarify that this was done in connection with the topic of the thesis, the assessment of solvency based on cash flows. In this aspect, the ability of assets to be transformed into cash is an integral attribute of the fulfillment of payment requirements. It is true that Victor Vladimirovich said that in assessment the degree of liquidity of an asset, the selling price should be taken into account. If this condition is not taken into account, the traditional solvency assessment using liquidity ratios gives very inaccurate results. That is why I only developed a methodological I developed a methodological approach in which solvency is not assessed through the sale of assets. Cash flows in this respect are more straightforward. The statement about the transformation of profit into cash in this case concerned only the general relationship between the statement of financial performance and cash flows. At the same time, in general, we do not abstract from the cases of bad accounts receivable, analyzing them in the framework of approbation of the author's methods of assessing solvency. In this study, only monetary forms of payment are really considered. The proposed methodological approach assumes a comparable form for assessing liabilities and means of their repayment, which is a simplification, which, however, is widely used in analytical practice. I agree with the comment on the regulation of external factors of solvency. Of course, in this context, not only state but also international regulation can take place. However, the main thing for the purpose of this study was to distinguish between internal factors of solvency regulated within the enterprise and external, regulated outside it. So therefore, this categorical statement was made. Thank you. Thank you. Dear colleagues, no questions that would relate to the presentation have been submitted. Therefore, I would like to give the floor to the academic advisor of the dissertation, Doctor of Economic Sciences, Nadezhda Alexeyevna Lvova, please. Dear Chairman, dear members of the dissertation committee, I will not talk on about the work itself. It's on a very relevant topic. and the research provides very significant results in terms of methodology and practice and theory. But I would like to talk about the researcher herself. Ekaterina Andreevna is very well versed in the field. She is a graduate of the University of Economics and Finance. She passed a doctoral exam. She has practical experience. She used to work as a financial controller and auditor, and as part of the work on the dissertation, she demonstrated productivity and self-discipline and responsibility that allowed her to organize the work on the dissertation very effectively. This brought new results, and the researcher had skills in financial analysis and the publication of the results of the dissertation in different journals. Also attests to the value of the dissertation, and these requirements have been met by the candidate, and therefore I believe that the author of the dissertation deserves the right to be awarded an academic degree of the economic candidate of economic sciences in the degree field. Thank you very much. Since this is not an entirely offline session, but it's also an online session. Therefore, I would like to ask a question. If there are any objections on the procedures or questions, please ask these questions. If there are no questions or objections, we'll continue. Therefore, the next item on the agenda, this has to do with the voting. First, we have two options. We deliberate and make a break, and ask the broadcast to be temporarily discontinued, so that we could discuss everything in private. And the second one, if everything is clear, if no additional deliberations are needed, then we don't switch off the broadcast. We just proceed to the voting. This is an open voting procedure. I ask each one of you, and you answer how you vote. So, what is the option? The second option is chosen. The second, yes, Dmitry. All right, then we continue our session. Natalia Stepanovna, your opinion. I believe that the work and the procedure allow me to state that Ekaterina Andreevna Karzaeva deserves the right to be awarded the third degree. Thank you. Vladimir Anatolievich, I'm in favor of awarding the candidate of sciences degree to Karzaeva Ekaterina Andreevna. Tatiana Pavlovna, your opinion. I'm in favor of awarding the degree of candidate of economic sciences in the field finance, currency circulation and credit. And Dmitry Alexeyevich, I also vote for the resolution. So I support that. Thank you very much. My opinion, I also support there is the decision to award Ekaterina Andreevna Karzaeva the academic degree, the candidate of sciences degree of economic sciences in the degree field. Dear colleagues and guests, out of the 5 members, all 5 members have voted for the resolution to award the third degree. No abstentions, no one voted against it. Therefore, the decision to award confer on Karzaeva Ekaterina Andreeva the degree of candidate of economic sciences is taken. Therefore, but since we have an online session, I need to ask you if there's any objections again on the procedure. No questions, no objections. Thank you very much. Then the concluding remarks. Everything has been organized very well. Thank you very much. The candidate has the floor. Thank you very much to Natalia Stepanovna, Viktor Vladimirovich, Tatiana Pavlovna, Dmitry Alexeyevich. Thank you very much for your support, for the time you spent on studying my research, for your constructive criticism. Viktor Vladimirovich, my special thanks to you and for your support and for the confidence in me. And invaluable help from Nadezhda Alexeyevna, always helped me with her advice day and night, and so invaluable assistance that helped me to complete my research and polish it. Thank you very much. Also, my gratitude to the members of the university staff that made this session possible, defense possible, technical staff, academic staff, and thank you for to my family. Ekaterina Andrea, congratulations on the success of this defense, and we hope to see further research and read your new journal articles in international journals and Russian journals. The session of the academic committee is now officially closed, and thank you all for participation. The podcast should